In today's video, we're diving into a really important topic: illegal questions and requests your boss might make. And you'd be surprised how often this happens. And knowing your rights is the first step to protecting yourself. So let's dive in. Now, before we jump in, the usual but very important disclaimer: I am an employment lawyer, but this video is for informational purposes only and is not legal advice. Every situation is unique, so if you're facing a specific issue, you need to consult with an attorney who can understand the details of your case specifically. All right, let's dive in. First up, questions about your age that go beyond simply verifying if you're legally old enough to work. While employers can ask if you're over 18 or over 21 if it's relevant for the job, like serving alcohol, they generally cannot ask for your specific age, especially if it seems like they're trying to figure out if you're too old or too young for a role. Now, why is this a big deal? Because there are laws against age discrimination. We have the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, which is a federal law applicable in all 50 states that protects workers who are 40 and older from age discrimination. And most states have their own state-specific anti-discrimination statutes, which also prohibit age discrimination. So, if your employer is asking for your exact age or making comments like, "We're looking for someone with more youthful energy," or "Are you sure you can keep up with the younger team members?" that's a huge red flag. They might be trying to gather information to discriminate you based on your age. This can also come up in conversations about retirement plans. They can't pressure you to retire. So if you're getting persistent questions about your age that don't seem relevant to your ability to do your job, that's a sign that your employer might be crossing a legal line. Let's talk about questions regarding your family. Your employer generally cannot ask you if you're married, if you have children, or if you plan on having children. You might hear things like, "Are you planning to start a family soon?" Or "How will you manage childcare with these hours?" While the latter might seem like a practical question, if it's phrased in a way that targets one gender over another or singles out parents, it can be discriminatory. These questions are often rooted in outdated assumptions about commitment and availability, particularly for women. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and state laws against discrimination protect against discrimination based on sex, which includes pregnancy and familial status. So if your boss is prying into your personal life about whether you're going to have kids or making assumptions about your dedication because you have a young child, that is a problem. They should be focused on your qualifications and ability to perform the job, not your family situation. And I made a whole video about pregnancy discrimination, so if you want to learn more about that topic, watch that video. I will leave a link in the description. Next is questions about your medical history. This one can be a bit nuanced, but it's crucial. Generally, an employer cannot ask you if you have a disability or inquire about your medical history or conditions before making a job offer. Now, after a job offer is made, they can ask you medical questions if the information is job related. Also, if you request a reasonable accommodation for a disability or medical condition, then a discussion about your limitations and what accommodations you need is appropriate. So the employer can ask about your medical history. And the employer can even ask for medical records to prove you have a medical need for the accommodation you requested. But during an interview, questions like, "Do you have a health condition we should know about?" or "Have you ever filed a workers' compensation claim?" are just off limits. The Americans with Disabilities Act and state-specific laws protect individuals from discrimination based on disability. An employer can ask if you can perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation, but they cannot go on a fishing expedition about your health. If you are facing questions about your health that seem unrelated to your ability to do the specific job tasks, especially before an offer, that's a major warning sign. Next is questions about your religious beliefs. Your religious beliefs are personal, and your employer generally has no right to ask you about them. They can't ask what religion you practice, how often you attend religious services, or what religious holidays you observe, unless it's in the context of you requesting a religious accommodation. For example, if you need a particular day off for a religious observation or need a schedule modification to attend a service, you can bring that up as a request for accommodation and your employer can then talk to you about it. But your employer cannot proactively ask these questions to gauge your religious beliefs or make employment decisions based on them. Again, Title VII and state laws protect against religious discrimination. This includes not only hiring and firing, but also harassment or creating a hostile work environment based on religion. So if your boss is making comments about your religion or a particular religion, or pressuring you to participate or not participate in religious activities, that's a serious issue. Next is asking you to work off the clock or waive overtime. And this one is incredibly common and often misunderstood. It's about employers demanding or expecting you to work without pay, often called working off the clock, or illegally denying you overtime. If you are an hourly non-exempt employee, federal and state laws require that you be paid for all the time you work. This includes any work your employer suffers or permits, meaning if they know or should know you're working, even if they didn't explicitly ask you to do it, they have to pay you for that time. So where does this all go wrong? First, working before or after your shift, unpaid. For example, if your boss says, "Could you clock out now and then just quickly finish organizing these files?" That time spent organizing after clocking out is work time and must be paid. Similarly, if you're required to arrive 15 minutes early to set up your station before your shift begins, that 15 minutes is compensable work time, meaning you have to get paid for that time. Next is working through unpaid meal breaks. If you have a 30-minute unpaid meal break, but your boss expects you to answer calls or do tasks during that break, you're essentially working and should be paid for that time. To be an unpaid break, you generally must be completely relieved of all duties. Next is pressure to volunteer time or take work home unpaid. Phrases like, "We all just pitch in to get it done, even if it means staying a bit late off the clock," or an expectation that you'll finish reports at home without logging that time can be illegal. To learn more about wage theft, watch my video on wage theft titled 4 Signs Your Employer is Stealing From You. I'll put a link to that video in the description. And then there's overtime. Non-exempt employees are entitled to overtime pay for all hours worked over 40 in a work week. Some employers try to avoid this in a few ways. First, misclassifying employees as exempt when they don't actually meet the strict legal duties test for exemptions. Next is averaging hours over 2 weeks to avoid overtime in a single week, which is not allowed for non-exempt employees. Another one is simply refusing to pay overtime or telling employees that the employer just doesn't pay overtime. The Fair Labor Standards Act and state minimum wage acts are very protective here. An employer cannot ask you to waive your right to be paid for all time worked or your right to overtime if you're legally entitled to it, meaning you're not exempt from overtime. If you're an hourly worker and your boss is asking you to do work before you clock in, after you clock out, or during unpaid breaks without pay, that's a major red flag for wage theft. To learn more about overtime specifically, watch my video on overtime. I'll leave a link to that video in the description as well. So what if your boss does ask you one of these illegal questions or makes an illegal request? The answer is to document everything. Keep notes of what was said, when, and who was present. If it's in writing like an email, save it. This documentation can be crucial if you decide to take legal action. So there you have it. Now you know what your employers cannot ask you. If you catch your employer saying something they shouldn't and want to know how to prove it, watch my video on how to prove your employer is lying. I'm going to leave links up here somewhere. And if you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos about your rights as a worker. And let me know in the comments if there are other workplace issues you'd like me to cover. The more we hold employers accountable, the more we protect other workers. That's all for me this week. See you next time.